people that would find themselves as misfits in any society or just different, that were not included or had to, live their life underground, found a safe home with Goth, because it didn't exclude anybody. If you said you were in, you were in, and I think that's still the same thing that's there. So that explains why it's still going, really.
What's up, everybody? It's Keefy from GhostCultMag.com, and I am honored, and I truly mean that, to be joined by founding member of The Cure, Lol Tolhurst, and of course Budgie, most best known from Susie and the Banshees, but personally, I love your time in the Slits. That was one of my favorite bands as a youth. Yes. Thank you both for being here today. I'm so excited to chat with you both.
Very nice to join you.
We'll see. First and foremost, we have so much stuff to talk about. Obviously, we're going to unpack this book that I'm holding, Goth, by Lol here, A History. This is your second book following your memoir, Cured, and Budgie, of course, wrote the foreword, which I also love. And so this book, there's been a lot of, there's kind of a weird, I don't want to say a goth renaissance, because that's not fair at all to anybody, but there is a weird pop cultural obsession with goth lately, the last few years, for some reason. Perhaps it's, the Wednesday series, the Addams Family series on Netflix. I was at the Sick New World Festival last year, which a lot of people talked about being heavy on nu metal, but actually was a tremendous stage of goth and industrial artists also, and sort of dancey music for sad people, as I like to call it. But this book is phenomenal. It's not super lengthy, but I really love the approach, and that's the first thing I wanted to talk to you about, Lol, is I love the, obviously you're pulling from, both of you, the forward and the book itself are pulling from your personal experiences, but I love the sort of this, it's not rooted in, fashion is only one element of this, and these iconic things, but I love the literature aspect. As a writing nerd, I love that that's where you kind of, pulled some of the basis of this culture came from art writers, people's affinity for art and writing, which is really, was really pleased me that this was your approach, and I wanted to ask about kind of like, how that started.
Well, really, I mean, that's easy because that was the way that we started with the Cure. Myself, Robert, Michael, we were all, for want of a better word, literature nerds, and that's what we loved, and that's how we found the way forward with, especially after like the first album, the sort of 17 seconds onward, that was where we found modus operandi, I guess. Me personally, my mother was the person that gave me the love of the written word and stuff, so it's always been part of me. I mean, for this book I had to think of a different thing, because the first book, it's just, you're just writing about yourself. So it's not that difficult. I mean, it's, you can remember things, and things you can't remember, you can sort of vaguely put together. With this, I had to write a lot about other people. So I had to have a template for the start. My template was a Californian writer that I discovered a few years back, Joan Didion. And I loved the way that she wrote about like news events, and they seemed almost like noir novel pieces that she wrote. There's this one story of a dentist being murdered by his wife in San Bernardino, and it's really dark and mysterious kind of story. So I just sort of took the voice that she had for that and adapted it to this, because I'm not a journalist, and I don't want to be either, and I don't think I can be. I'm not this. I farmed off all the research for this book to my son, because he's the one that has the degrees in English literature, so I knew he would be good at it. But for me, I just like to, in the same way as with the Cure, we just put the ideas that are in these books were part of our life, and then what was part of our life was the diary of our life, and that was the songs. So it's the same way for this. I tried to put together, because on when I finished Cured, I did like a big tour all around the place for several years, and one of the questions I got asked the most was, well, what was it like to be, a goth person back in those times? Because, this wasn't around, and there's a few pictures, but some of the pictures don't really tell the whole story. Like, I've got some pictures in the book that have pictures of the Batcave, and yes, there's all people that we might think look fairly goth in there, but as Budgie will remember, there was a lot of people that didn't look like that at all. They just didn't get photographed. People were like, oh, that must be the goth look, so they take those pictures. So I wanted to kind of get across the idea of the inclusive nature of it, which also explains why it's still going now.
Right, and maybe part and parcel of that, the outcome of that, punk was not meant to be inclusive except of other punks, and it was very reactionary to what was going on at the time, both in the U.S. and England. And it does seem like these other subgenres and subcultures of people are much more accepting. All the misfits, please come on to me, goths and the new wave and post-punk fans and people of those little scenes all seem to get along, at least from what I can tell, as opposed to like punks, if you're not one of us, get the fuck out.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing about it is for like the sort of, and I found this already because I've done a few events for this new book. People that would find themselves as misfits in any society or just different, that were not included or had to, live their life underground, found a safe home with goth, because it didn't exclude anybody. If you said you were in, and I think that's still the same thing that's there. So that explains why it's still going, really.
This is probably a question I can pose to both of you. I don't want to say necessarily that goths are smarter, but again, we talked about these literary bases. It's not just the dark and the macabre that obviously everybody's attracted to, because we are all fascinated with death and things like that, and the dark side of life. But I do find it interesting that it's not just Poe, and it's not just it's not just these horrific things, but Eliot and things. This like very deep and soulful poetry is also some of the basis of this culture and music. And so maybe this is something you can both reflect on. It's not just everybody wearing black and being sad. It's also this whole myriad of human experience that I think goth encapsulates. Any ideas, fellas? Budgie, maybe?
As you were talking, I'm thinking of kind of what you were saying. There was a uniform for, the King's Road punk that the tabloids kind of elaborated. And it was almost immediately there was the kind of kickback against that. But it was, I suppose, as we started to be making music, it was, and you just mentioned the dress as well. And I was suddenly realizing that if I looked at early Banshees, I was struck by Kenny and John, the original guitarist and drummer, who were besuited, were very stylish, but it wasn't punk. And it wasn't what preceded it. There was a certain nod to a certain period of Bowie, maybe, but it was a kind of, and it wasn't Kid Creole and the Coconuts either, so it wasn't like a zoot suit. But you couldn't just step into a store and find that clothing. You had to be piecing it together. And it wasn't Vivienne Westwood and Malcolm McLaren's latest creation either, because that went on to be, Bow Wow Wow or wherever it was in Mud. They had it was somewhere, it lay somewhere else. It wasn't rooted in the street movement. It was, as we've kind of alluded to, it was a more thinking person. There was more, it was kind of bringing your inner knowledge to the fore, and it manifested in many different ways. It was it came out in drone music. It came out in an appreciation of the Velvet Underground, but not necessarily a continuation. And I think there's a lot to do with that. I think the cleverness of Wire, the smartness of their approach to lyrics, and the visual approach to the music and the scenes they set. I think of the psychedelic fairs and the cinemascope stuff they were working with, and the subject matter. It was much more vast, being on the Dole in Ipswich. Sorry, Ipswich, could be anywhere.
Norwich. Yeah,
Norwich, sale of the century. Yes, and that it just, as I'm just sitting there because I've not pondered on this. Lol has. I'm just musing on what you actually what's coming at me, and it was that. It's like somebody mentioned. I went down to see an exhibition here in Berlin last night just by accident. It said Hypnosis, and it was all the album sleeves from that period in British. But there was a guy here in Berlin called Mark. And Mark was kind of from Manchester, from kind of that kind of era, same era as I was in. And we always bumped into Mark when we came over early gigs in Berlin or Belgium. And there was a lady called Anique, and who was linked with Ian Curtis, I think, with New Order. And Join Hands, the album, was in that film that Anton Corbijn put together. And I realized there was this breaking away, this, if you like, new culture was finding its feet and its if you like its players from very diverse walks of life, pulling in photography, film, literature. Severin was the film archivist and Susie was the avid reader. I just played the drums.
You did so much more. Yeah, the other thing, and you sort of alluded to that, was the subject matter was a greater consideration. Things I did something. I'll tell you a funny story. Last couple of weeks ago, well, no, it's about a month ago now. I was in New York. I did a book event for Goth, and at one point I said to everybody, "Yeah, none of us is getting out of here alive, right?" And there was a deathly silence because they all thought, and I went, "Oh, no, I don't mean I'm doing anything here. It's a fact of life."
The doors are locked.
Yeah,
This is it, folks. And my finger's on the button.
Yeah, we just, we're all existing here right now. But the thing is, a lot of modern music and everything just sort of ignored that point. A lot of modern life, period, just ignores that. Like, yeah, we're all going to die one day, but meanwhile we're going to dance, and that's fine as well because that's how you have to go along. But the thing about Goth was it considered those points and it gave you some kind of acceptance of what the other side. And people would always say to me, early on with The Cure, they say, "Oh, you make really dark, depressing music, and people must get more depressed from it, and maybe, in fact, maybe they do something bad to themselves." I said, "No, that's completely wrong. What happens is people find that stuff and they find an ally and they find some way to relate to their own feelings, and it usually helps. 99% of the time it helps, and I always find people tell me that. And for me, I'm humbled and flattered that is the case, but I know it's the case. I've yet to meet somebody that comes up to me and goes, "Oh yeah, my grandmother killed herself because she listened to one of your records." It's like, no, that's not going to happen. It's the opposite. So I think really it's an acceptance of where we are in the world, which naturally brings gravitas to it, and also brings in all the art forms because a lot of them have considered those things a long time before the music started.
Right. I think lucky for us, almost everyone I know has found relief in your music, relief in the music of The Cure, relief in the music of Susie and the Banshees and all these other groups, and Joy Division, and obviously the most famous case of Ian, so sad and so young to give in to his demons, but Joy Division and Vis-a-Vis gave us New Order that has healed and helped a lot of people. And that kind of helps me with my own segue because I'm that kind of guy. The middle section of the book has these incredible anecdotes from shows and you say you're not a journalist, but there's a very analytical take on some of this music and these releases and these events, maybe these keystone events, cornerstone events in the scene, if you will, if that's accurate. Tell me if I'm not, please correct me if I've got that wrong. But yeah, I love these deep, even though it's in brief pages, it's very deep and well, executed analysis of these things that have helped propel this forward as a culture. And so I really want to say thank you. That's my favorite part of the book, is that center part of the book. I did find, obviously the introduction is your life story, also a continuation, if you will, from Cured. But I love that middle section and all this great analysis. I think that's the thing that fans are going to gravitate to, I believe, when they pick this book up to read it.
Yeah, that's the best kind of part of it for a lot of people. Yeah, that's what they like. They like that section of it, which is good. The end section, which is about where things are going now and stuff and that. It's like I can have a viewpoint on it, but I don't have such an experience of it. For that I had to lean on my son, because he has a greater experience of that. What's going on with it. I mean, it's like, it's funny, at my age, you find a lot of people come up to you that are your age as well and go conspiratorially like, oh, there's no good music now. And I go, well, yeah, no, you're wrong. You just don't know where to look. You've forgotten how to find it. But I have an instant, connection to that because I just call my son up and go, great, what should I be listening to? What's good? What do I need to hear? And so I find it from him. So that's how I know it's still going on. Yeah, I mean, the center part is really the story of it. It's extrapolated from my own experience, but it's really the story of what happened in those early 80s years. And you're right, it has more analysis. It has analysis because all the main players I know personally, so therefore I have a much I don't know, more personal view about it all. Some of the first things, although I can walk down 2 miles from my house and see the wall where Jim Morrison's poetry is wrapped around the police station on Venice Beach, I don't have an experience of that. I just have, the experience I have now, which is why I sort of describe like the area is still like that, the 1970s. There's still this sort of wafting of patchouli oil, in amongst like, the hip hop guys and giving out their CDs and stuff. It's like, it's still there. It hasn't left. So I'm a great believer that places have, they soak up whatever happened there and whatever.
Oh my God.
They give it out, which is obviously
you want to walk the streets of Berlin.
Well, yeah, that's right. That's what I was just thinking about.
It's heavy duty. It really is. If ever that could describe this place in one sentence, it absorbed so much negative or positive energy, and it just it hits you in the face each day. If you're awake, if you're aware of it, I think there's maybe that as well.
Yeah, I always think like big cities and that, and when I go to most big, huge capital cities or whatever are very similar. They're cosmopolitan places. They have everybody from all over the world. But I always think to myself, if you walk along a street where it's like a main street, like Oxford Street or something, if you look in London, if you look along just at ground level, you see all the usual culprits. You see McDonald's, you see all the different stores and stuff, and it could be anywhere. Could be anywhere on the planet. But if you look up a couple of a couple of floors higher, that usually tells you the whole thing, because none of that ever changes. When they decide they're going to make a new store, they just go, okay, this part, And so when I'm going to a new city, I never look at ground level. I'm always looking up around me, see what's up there, what they haven't changed, what's still got that stuff in it. Yeah.
I just have 2 last questions about the book before we talk briefly about the album. First of all, and shout out to Venice Beach, one of my favorite places on earth. Both of you have remarkable recall, considering everything we've all been through in life. Yeah. Not just the years, but just life, right, happens at you and to you. How do you account for this? I appreciate your son's help with this book, Lol. Yeah. Your recall of firsthand accounts are so compelling, and same with you, Budgie. How do you account for this recall? Like, I'm fascinated that you can have these moments.
Most of it's live. We just make it up. No.
Which answer are you going to give?
No. I think the thing is that
we sold our soul.
Yeah. As you get older, your recall of events 30, 40 years ago become much more crystalline and clear. Whether or not they're the real version of it doesn't really matter. They're your version. They're how you remember it, how you recall it. Because everybody, recalls things. I defy anybody to remember what they spoke about yesterday and remember verbatim the words. You can't. It's impossible. So, I think it's really that just my old literary agent used to tell me he would never commission a memoir from somebody who was in their 30s. He said, because they're too close to the stuff, whatever happened to them in their 20s, he said, they don't remember it right. They just forget all of this stuff, and it's all through a different kind of lens. So, I wrote Cured when I was in my 50s, and I had a good viewpoint about it because I could, by that time, all the whatever pain, anguish, or ever parts of my memories were gone, and I could look at it very clinically. I think the same is true for what I did with Goth. I can look at all those things and think, okay, this was what's important about it. I can't remember what I had for lunch yesterday, but I can pretty much remember, 30, 40, 20 years ago quite easily.
Is that just? I'm sure. See, I think you just answered one of my that short-term memory becomes less precise and important. But
Yeah.
I wonder, had we continued our lives on the track we were on,
Yeah.
but because this is what we've realized since meeting, after all these years of being in and out of each other's lives, that we both put a kind of a full stop on the lifestyle we had
Yeah.
at a point. And we're both far enough away from that point. I think there's a certain amount of clarity from stopping a certain amount of damage.
Well, yeah, I think for me, speaking for myself, I'm pretty sure that I wouldn't be here if I'd still continued. I think, I would have shuffled off the mortal coil quite a few years ago. So,
Hence, cured.
Yeah, exactly. But
and it is amazing the clarity one can achieve.
Yeah.
But it's not just remembering; it's being there. You just kind of go,
yeah,
and you're back in that room.
One of the things I found very surprising, and I'm sure that Budgie's finding that now because Budgie's in the midst of writing a book. Down the bag there. When you start to think about those things, and you go, "Oh, how am I going to remember what happened that year?" And you remember one thing, and then they're like dominoes; they start to fall one after the other. For me, when I was writing Cured, I would wake up in the middle of the night and I'd think, "That's what that happened. That's what went from here." And I would remember something, and I think, "Shit, I've got to write it down because if I don't write it down now, you'll go back to sleep and it'll be gone." But I didn't write it down. I just overturned my phone on, spoke into it. My wife would wake up, go, "Is it something wrong?" She'll find me mumbling into the phone. I go, "No, I just got to remember this." And after a while, we got used to it. But it was, put earplugs in. But you do. You remember a lot of things, and that was part of writing the book. Was I decided, I'm getting up to past my 50s, and I was thinking, I don't want to go into that good night, like sort of, I don't want to go without having done as many things as I think I could do, and so that's why I decided, okay, I'm going to try and write a book because I had no experience in that, and it was kind of terrifying at first. But now, I'm chomping at the bit to get onto the next one because I love it as much as I like playing music. It's the same feeling. It just takes a little longer.
Oh, that's a neat little segue. If ever I had one.
Right.
Yes. By the way,
and by the way, I was about to say, Budgie, we look forward to your book tremendously. But yeah,
Me too, yes.
you're getting quite good at these, Lol. So I want to encourage you to please write another if you can. If you've got anything more to say, we want to hear it.
Yeah, I got plenty more to say. Whether anybody will listen to it is not.
Well, I'm here. I'll be here ready to do another chat, but we're not done yet. Let's talk about Los Angeles, this new record that also came out the same, right, and basically aligned with the book within a month and change, with Jacknife Lee and a plethora of artists and friends. So that's, first and foremost, the record's great on its own, but I love these guest appearances. So I wanted to ask if you both wrote with guests in mind, or wrote with them, or wrote for them. I'm curious to know that.
I suppose the simple answer would be, oh no, but it can't be that somehow, because I think we believe in a greater depth than that, and we're so. Somebody was posing the question, do you feel telepathic after this experience together? That drummer's thing of not having to talk too much. Yeah. And I just wonder how we caught people in a moment in time when they were open to suggestion. And so did we write with them in mind? No, we're not. But we fell into line, I think. That's the best I can describe, because I can't otherwise explain how seemingly we were all, very simply, but on the same page. Ian Brody's book just fell on the floor. Sorry, Ian. Yes, you got that bit wrong about us going to the music machine together. Yep. I'm not sure he did. But it's just that. It's uncanny. It was uncanny that the way that the lyrics and the vocals came back as they did from the people we put out feelers to, the people that responded with positivity, responded in a way that just took us to another place. which is where we couldn't have dreamed we would have got to. So we thought we're coming out with an instrumental album with maybe a poem, right, Lol?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we kind of did it like the way we first, any musician first starts playing music with other people. You sit in a room together. It's more of a social thing. You sit in a room together and somebody's like plays something and you go, oh, I've got something to go with that. Or maybe you don't even say anything. You just start playing with them. And that's the way we made this record because, we had a sort of not a full start, but we had an idea when Budgie was on tour here with John Grant and my friend Joe said, "Oh, I'm going to go and do an interview with Budgie." I said, "Great, I'll come along and talk to him because I haven't seen him for a while." And we went for a lunch or breakfast or something, and there was me, Budgie, my friend Joe, and Kevin Haskins from Bauhaus was there. And I sort of know Kevin a bit at that point, and Budgie knew him a bit. And we sort of said, well, maybe, we were half sort of joking, like, forget like the three tenors, let's have the three drummers, let's do something like that. And so we did, for about, I don't know, how long did we do that for? Do you remember?
Oh, no. I mean, we were writing, we got kits together, then we took all that stuff and then we just went on a little like reclusive trip, didn't we? And cooked for each other.
A nice trip onto the middle of California, Central Coast. A friend of mine, another drummer.
Well, it couldn't be more removed. Where we ended up couldn't be more removed from that. The idea we were pursuing at that point. We ended up with Lonnie Holly, who I wasn't familiar with. I hadn't heard of Lonnie, and so it was an education. And an amazing story comes to your table, and we still haven't met. Although I've played drums with Lonnie's voice, totally a cappella, just on an extension of this project. But what happens with that, I don't know. But it was an uncanny meeting without meeting, and I can only explain if you actually transmit that back to the album. It was not like, it was as if we had been together somewhere and come up with some of our best collaborative work.
I mean, one of the ideas as well, I think, is because it was the pandemic. You have to remember we started all this stuff just before the pandemic, and we had recorded things, and then the world shut down. And I live in a fairly sort of genteel neighborhood, and during the day, because I'm either here or I'm on the road. There's two things that I do, and that's it. So I'm here a lot of the time during the day, and I would go on a daily walk or something. And normally I see nobody, like everybody's at work doing something. But during the pandemic, I would see people, like after 2 months, their minds are blown. They didn't know what to do by themselves. They're making wood projects in their garage and things, that stuff. It was crazy. But for us, and I think for a lot of other musicians, it was just a time to like, be with yourself and think about stuff. So we got a lot of people that when we approached them and we said, look, we've got these tracks, do you want to see if there's something you could put on it? And that they were open because they weren't on the road. They weren't doing things, they were just like, yeah, okay. And most of the people that we sent it to, I mean, I can only think of a couple of ones that didn't work out, but most of it worked out. And I think that's like the collective mind was the same, in lots of ways. So that's where the synergy comes for me, that it was natural, for a musician to be at home in this great worldwide pandemic to write about something that's a bit more dramatic than maybe they would normally do, because that's how the whole world felt. I mean, isn't it amazing how, now it's only like, last year that it kind of petered out a bit and nearly everybody's forgotten, really sort of thing. It's like there's no news about it. It's like it's gonna go away. I always think of that Stephen King thing, that was it, the Langoliers, they're eating, time is getting eaten up as it goes, behind
the past being eaten.
Well, exactly. That's where I got to. Anyway, yeah. So it's the same thing.
Maybe that's it, Lol. Maybe there's a moment in time there we've captured it forever, and because we didn't send songs out, we didn't send verse, chorus, and the middle eight. We just sent out an idea, and we didn't get back just a sketch. We got back kind of things that really had construction, and we were able to decipher them, because there were no clues, there was no this is what we're thinking, this is where we'd like to go, we would like you to adopt this voice rather than that one you usually use. There was nothing like that.
No,
it just happened.
It begs the question, doesn't it? If it had to be the pandemic to make this album, what are we going to have to happen for the next one? Or is it on its way already?
I thought you'd got it with the room in the nobody gets out real live. We just invite everybody to the studio and say, okay.
I was going to ask,
we're recording, yeah.
Right. I was going to ask. You mentioned Lonnie. How does one ring up the Edge from U2 or Isaac from Modest Mouse or Mark from Idols and say, hey, would you like to be, or Arrow, how would you like to be on this track? Or do you just match people with the music you already started to make? How does that happen?
Total collaboration, that people had worked with people. Jacknife, of course, is connected, and geographically, Edge is like 2 valleys over. So it was kind of transferred by pigeon, or smoke signal. Yeah. And he knew. I think people started to become aware of what was going on at his place. And some people said, "I'll pop round," and other people said, "What's going on?" And I think Edge was one of those, "What's going on?" And others were just as blatantly asking people. And Arrow was in that group because she was local, and somebody knew where she was, so we could get the word out. Yeah. And she was up for it.
She actually went to the studio. One of the few people that actually went to the studio, didn't send their work, by. I mean, obviously, people like Bobby Gillespie live on another continent, so you have to do it that way. But
I'd recently bumped into to James and Bobby on tour with their respective bands around Europe, and they were actually the first meaningful conversations I've ever had. James for the first time, Bobby for the clarity for the first time in a long time of meetings. And it wasn't like, hey, we're doing this project, it was just a meeting of minds and a kindred spirit kind of feel, because I met a lot of other people that I wouldn't have invited to anything I was doing. No.
Nice. In addition to this beautiful gumbo of these tracks, it's hard to encapsulate everything that is LA, a wonderful and frightful place at the same time. But I love the lyric, and I'm gonna sum up the interview here with this question. I love this lyric that Los Angeles eats its babies. It's awe inspiring, but it's also like, wow. Right, it's very impactful. So I think that's I know you're trying to, the whole record makes a statement kind of, and the city is complex and life is complex. But I love that line in particular of all the whole album.
It's powerful performance. They're powerful poetic lyrics. They're kind of larger than they're that makes the tracks. They're larger than they are the sum of their parts. Perhaps it is something that describes Los Angeles in a way that we never thought. You mentioned Joan Didion, and just the things that she sees and the things that she was able to put together that formed a much bigger version of the event she was describing, like you mentioned.
Yes, and I mean, in the end, what we're doing is using it really as a metaphor for what was going on at the time, which was, hey, are we all going to be stuck at home forever and ever and ever? And is this the end of the world, So it's kind of all in there, and it comes from the strangest of places. One of my favorite tracks on there that was kind of almost, took me completely by surprise was Pan Amsterdam, because it's so melancholy. Like the sound he gets with his trumpet, and just like the lyrics, and just so melancholy. And we're going to talk to him next week, so that's going to be fun for the podcast.
We have never met, we've never spoken, but we know him well. A strange way of knowing somebody. Maybe that's it. It's a kind of that thing you feel somebody through what they've given to you. Yeah. A lyric, a poem. We talking to Mark Bowen, who put the guitar on we spoke with Mark just last night, and it's lovely when you can just connect on yet another level. I'm just I just feel so full of gratitude, just so fortunate to have met these kindred spirits. I'd call them other musicians, but people who allow themselves just to be and see what turns up and not make too much of a fuss about it, you know. And that, I think, is the key to the success of this project, because it's already successful regardless of what happens next.
Well said, well said. That's a good place to stop. Gentlemen, thank you so much for this conversation. In reverse order, the album Los Angeles is out now from Lol Tolhurst, Budgie, and Jacknife Lee. But of course, we were also here today to talk about this amazing book. Thank you, Hachette Publishing, for sending me Goth, a history. Thank you for this book. Thank you for this new music. Thank the both of you for joining Ghost Cult today. I really appreciate it. And be well, and we'll see you in the next one, I hope.
Thank you, Keefy.
Thank you.